Hi everyone, this is Matteo Wiegold from TOC Worldwide, and we are here at TOC Asia. I am joined here by Tim Miltenburg, Head of Decarbonization of the Center of Excellence at APM Terminals. Hi Tim, how are you?
Hi Matteo.
No, thank you for joining us. And well, we just finished a session where Tim was speaking, and it was really interesting. And I wanted to ask you maybe a few more questions just to deep dive on the element of net zero. Yeah. So I think you guys were talking during the session about ZEPA, the initiative that you have with DP World, and you mentioned the element of electric batteries powering equipment. So I think for those people that may not be aware of it, what would you say are the benefits, the tangible benefits of battery electric cargo handling equipment for terminals looking to decarbonize their operations?
So that's a very good question. I would say there's a couple of benefits. I mean, of course, obviously, many parties do this to achieve their emissions targets, their net zero targets, right? So it's lower greenhouse gas emissions, but also lower other sort of air quality related pollutants, which actually have an impact on human health. Okay. So I think that's one of the benefits, that it just has lower emissions, lower impact on the environment. So that's one. Mm-hmm. I think two, and that's, I would say, almost as important for this to scale, is that it has increasingly a lower total cost of ownership. Because of actually the fact that battery electric container handling equipment is more energy efficient and has lower cost of maintenance. Yeah. So therefore, if you look at the total life cycle of the equipment, it's actually now increasingly lower to operate versus a diesel counterpart. So that makes it economically also attractive for terminal operators. And then third, I think, which is also quite interesting, is that it can reduce your reliance actually on relatively volatile fossil fuel imports by switching from fossil fuels actually to locally produced and sourced electricity. And there's increasingly then levers that you can use to basically make sure you have a more sort of consistent cost of energy rather than with the relatively volatile fossil fuel prices. I think for me, those are some of the key benefits that we see of the transition to electric equipment.
And for example, because there are terminals in different parts of the world, and each part of the world has a different reality. So do you think it's possible to achieve standardization of container handling equipment that is powered by these type of electric batteries? What would you say are the necessary steps for this, and the implications in terms of equipment for the terminals?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think if we talk about standardization, it's good to realize that we're not talking about you have to standardize every single thing and it all has to be the same. Okay. But what this is about for me, and I think for terminal operators, is that you want equipment to be somewhat interoperable, and charging technology and charging infrastructure, so that you're not, if I go with supplier X, that prevents me from going with supplier Y because they operate a different battery chemistry or a different charging technology, right? There's that element. And ultimately we want this to scale, right? So you want to be able to have somewhat similar maintenance practices, safety practices across battery electric equipment, rather than having everything very diffuse and making it more difficult and just more expensive to scale. So I think that's the rationale. That doesn't mean you have to standardize everything, but you have to standardize some of the key elements, like battery chemistry, what type of charging technology are you using, right? I mean, the plug needs to fit, the communication protocol needs to work. So for me, it's actually, I don't want to say it's super simple, because it's not that simple, but the steps are not that difficult. It's about, first of all, identifying the parties that you need to standardize the equipment, right? You need the OEMs. Sometimes you need multiple OEMs, because our OEMs work with their suppliers. Yeah. You need the terminal operator, which is the user, but then you're basically already there in terms of the parties that you need. So that's one. And then two, it's about identifying actually which parts are relatively, I would say, require relatively low effort to standardize, or at least not too much effort. Okay. And where there's a lot of value. So typically those are the two things that you want to then look at. Where is the value and how much effort is there to standardize, in order to prioritize what things you standardize. And then it's about just working together through what are the different options that we have, and typical engineering and design exercises, basically. So those are very high level, the three steps. identifying the partners you need to collaborate with, prioritizing what standards you want to actually or what specs you want to standardize, and then working through the design and engineering exercise together with OEMs and terminal operators.
Yes, I guess it's like identifying what's actionable and feasible.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm guessing also, to make this possible, we might need a considerable amount of energy, of electric energy being supplied. So would you say that with the existing grids that is enough? Do you think that, for example, terminals may need to develop their own grids? What would be the requirements?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say in terms of what we need in terms of electrical supply, it needs to be reliable. It needs to be somewhat affordable, because otherwise we can't electrify. The business case just doesn't work. And it needs to be renewable, right? Because ultimately we don't want to displace the emissions and just move it elsewhere. Now, what's needed? So what is needed is fairly consistent across geographies. But then what the challenges are very different, right? We have terminals where there's plenty of capacity in the power supply, so there won't be any issues in the near term. But we have jurisdictions where there are already constraints on the amount of power you can get, or terminals where we don't have any power. I would say typically it should be the utility companies, the grid and utility companies ensuring sufficient power supply. But what that's going to require, I think, is increasing collaboration across the port ecosystem between terminal operators, port authorities, and these utility companies to jointly understand what is the current power profile looking like, what is that going to look like as we electrify increasingly, so that the utilities can then actually plan for that. And then I think finally there is a role to play also for terminal operators and port authorities as well, but especially terminal operators in employing smart energy management technologies, battery energy storage systems to help reduce sort of the peak power demand on the grid and to sort of optimize their electricity consumption, so that we can also prevent some of the infrastructure investments from being required.
Yeah, because there could be like some peaks where let's say like rush hour of electricity.
Exactly. And then if you have a battery that's charged, that can actually supply part of that electricity and that power demand, you can avoid having to draw that power from the grid and therefore reduce some of the peak power demand.
So yeah, it's a smarter use of the energy.
Exactly.
Well, I think this could actually be very feasible, and hopefully we will see it in the not so longer term. I would love to keep asking you more questions, but we don't have that much time. But if you want to know more about these initiatives, go to the APM Terminals website, go to the ZEPA website, and just have a look and see what else we can do to decarbonize our industry. Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. See you at the next talk. Bye.
Bye.